Hi everyone, happy Friday. Today's presentation is going to be the book Gone. It is a series of books. I believe there's maybe 7 of them, and it is a situation where there are kids who are trapped in an area and something super dramatic happens to them. And then I'll tell you a bit more right afterwards. But I wanted to let you know that it's by Michael Grant, and his wife happens to be Catherine Applegate, who is another very famous author and one of our school's favorites. For instance, she's done The One and Only Ivan and so many other great books. So check this out. This is our cover. It's on the screen as well. And we will begin. Chapter 1, 299 hours and 54 minutes. 1 minute the teacher was talking about the Civil War, and the next minute he was gone. There. Gone. No poof, no flash of light, no explosion. Sam Temple was sitting in the third period history class, staring blankly at the blackboard, but far away in his head. In his head he was down at the beach, he and Quinn. Down at the beach with their boards, yelling, bracing for that first plunge into the cold Pacific water. For a moment, he thought that he imagined it. The teacher disappearing. For a moment, he thought he'd slipped into a daydream. Sam turned to Mary Terrafino, who sat just to his left. "You saw that, right?" Mary was staring hard at the place where the teacher had been. Where's Mr. Trentlake?" It was Quinn Gaither, Sam's best and maybe only friend. Quinn sat right behind Sam. The two of them favored the window seats because sometimes, if you caught the right angle, you could actually see a tiny sliver of sparkling water between the school buildings and the homes beyond. "He must have left," Mary said, not sounding like she believed it. Adilio, a new kid Sam found potentially interesting, said, "No, man, poof." He did that thing with his fingers that was a pretty good illustration of the concept. Kids were staring at one another, craning their necks this way and that, giggling nervously. Nobody was scared. No one was crying. The whole thing just seemed kind of funny. "Mr. Trentlake poofed," said Quinn, with a suppressed giggle in his voice. "Hey," someone said, "where's Josh?" Heads turned to look. "Was he here today?" "Yeah, he was here. He was right here next to me." Sam recognized the voice. "Bad, bouncing bad. He just, disappeared," Bet said. "Just like Mr. Trentlake." The door to the hallway opened. Every eye locked on it. Mr. Trentlake was going to step in, maybe with Josh, and explain how he'd pulled off this magic trick, and then maybe get him all back to talking in his excited and strained voice about the Civil War that nobody cared about. But it wasn't Mr. Trentlake. It was Astrid Ellison, known as Astrid the Genius, because she was a genius. Astrid was in all AP classes that the school had. In some subjects, she was taking online courses from the university. Astrid had shoulder-length blonde hair and liked to wear starched white short-sleeved blouses that never failed to catch Sam's eye. Astrid was out of his league. Sam knew that. But there was no law against thinking about her. "Where's your teacher?" Astrid asked. There was a collective shrug. "He poofed," Quinn said, like maybe it was funny. "Isn't he out in the hallway?" Mary asked. Astrid shook her head. "Something weird is happening. My math study group, there were just 3 of us, plus the teacher, and they all disappeared." "What?" Sam asked. Astrid looked right at him. He couldn't look away like he normally would, because her gaze wasn't a challenging, skeptical one like it usually was. It was actually scared. Her normally sharp, discerning blue eyes were wide, with way too much white showing. "They're gone! They all just disappeared." "What about your teacher?" Adilio said. "She's gone too," Astrid said. "Gone?" "Poof," Quinn said, not giggling so much now, starting to think maybe it wasn't such a joke after all. Sam noticed a sound, more than one really, distant car alarms coming from town. He stood up, feeling self-conscious, like it wasn't really his place to do so, and walked on stiff legs to the door. Astrid moved away so he could step past her. He could smell her shampoo as he went by. Sam looked left, down toward room 211, the room where Astrid's math wonks met. The next door down, 213, a kid stuck out his head. He had a half-scared, half-giddy expression, like someone buckling into a roller coaster. The other direction, down at 207, kids were laughing too loud, freaky loud. 5th graders. Across the hall, room 208, 3 6th graders suddenly burst out into the hallway and stopped dead. They stared at Sam like he might yell at them. Perdido Beach School was a small-town school, with everyone from kindergarten to 9th grade all in one building, elementary and middle school together. High school was an hour's drive away in San Luis. Sam walked toward Astrid's classroom. She and Quinn were right behind him. The classroom was empty. Desk chairs and teacher's chair, all empty. Math books lay open on 3 of the desks. Notebooks, too. The computers, a row of 6 aged Macs, all showed flickering blank screens. On the chalkboard, you could quite clearly see pollen. "She was writing the word polynomial," Astrid said in a church voice whisper. "Yeah, I was going to guess that," Sam said dryly. "I had a polynomial once," Quinn said. "My doctor removed it." Astrid ignored the weak attempt at humor. "She disappeared in the middle of writing the O. I was looking right at her." Sam made a slight motion, pointing. A piece of chalk lay on the floor, right where it would have fallen if someone were writing the word polynomial, whatever that meant, and had disappeared before rounding off the O. "This is not normal," Quinn said. Quinn was taller than Sam, stronger than Sam, at least as good a surfer, but Quinn, with his half-crazy, half-smile and tendency to dress in what could only be called a costume. Today it was baggy shorts, army surplus desert boots, and a pink golf shirt, and a gray fedora that he found in his grandfather's attic, put out a weird guy vibe that alienated some and scared others. Quinn was his own clique, which maybe was why he and Sam clicked. Sam Temple kept a lower profile. He stuck to jeans and understated T-shirts, nothing that drew attention to himself. He had spent most of his life in Perdido Beach, attending this school, and everyone knew who he was, but few people were quite sure what he was. He was a surfer who didn't hang out with surfers. He was bright, but not a brain. He was good-looking, but not so that the girls thought of him as a hottie. The one thing most kids knew about Sam Temple was that he was School Bus Sam. He earned the nickname when he was in 7th grade. The class had been on their way to a field trip when the bus driver had suffered a heart attack. They'd been driving down the highway, number 1, and Sam pulled the man out of his seat, steered the bus onto the shoulder of the road, and brought it safely to a stop, calmly dialing 911 on the driver's cell phone. If he had hesitated for even a second, the bus would have plunged off the cliff and into the ocean. His picture had been in the paper. "The other 2 kids plus the teacher are gone, all except Astrid," Sam said. "That's definitely not normal." He tried not to trip over her name when he said it, but he failed. She had that effect on him. "Yeah, kind of quiet in here, brah," Quinn said. "Okay, I'm ready to wake up now." And for once, Quinn was not kidding. Someone screamed. The 3 of them stumbled into the hall, which was now full of kids. A 6th grader named Becca was the one screaming. She was holding her cell phone. There's no answer! There's no answer! She cried. There's nothing! For 2 seconds, everyone froze. Then a rustle and a clatter, followed by the sound of dozens of fingers punching in dozens of keypads. It's not doing anything. My mom would be home. She'd answer, even if it's not ringing. Oh my God, there's no internet either. I have a signal, but there's nothing. I have 3 bars. Me too, but it's not there. Someone started wailing. A creepy, flesh-crawly sound. Everyone talked at once, the chatter escalating to yelling. Try 911, a scared voice demanded. Who do you think I called, numbnuts? There is no 911. There's nothing. I've gone through half of my speed dials, and there's not anything. The hall was as full of kids as it would have been during a class change, but people weren't rushing to their next class or playing around or spinning the locks on their lockers. There was no direction. People just stood there like a herd of cattle waiting to stampede. The alarm bell rang, as loud as an explosion. People flinched like they'd never heard of it before. What do we do? More than one voice asked. There must be someone in the office, a voice cried out. The bell went off. It's on a timer, moron. This was from Howard. Howard was a little warm, but he was Orc's #1 toady, and Orc was a glowering thug of an 8th grader, a mountain of fat and muscle who scared even 9th graders. No one called Howard out. Any insult to Howard would be an attack by Orc. They have a TV in the teacher's lounge, Astrid said. Sam and Astrid, with Quinn racing after them, pelted toward the lounge. They flew down the stairs, down to the bottom floor where there were fewer classrooms, fewer kids. Sam's hand on the door of the teacher's lounge. They froze. We're not supposed to be in there, Astrid said. You care? Quinn said. Sam pushed the door open. The teachers had a refrigerator. It was open. A carton of Dan and Blueberry yogurt was on the floor. Gooey contents spilled out onto the ratty carpet. The TV was on, but there was no picture, just static. Sam searched for the remote. Where was the remote? Quinn found it. He started running through the channels. Nothing and nothing and nothing. Cable's out, Sam said, aware it was kind of a stupid thing to say. Astrid reached behind the set and unscrewed the coaxial cable. The screen flickered, and the quality of the static changed a little, but as Quinn ran the channels, there was still nothing and nothing and nothing. You could always get Channel 9, Quinn said, even without cable. Astrid said, Teachers, some of the kids, cable, broadcast, cell phones, all gone at the same time? She frowned, trying to work it out. Sam and Quinn waited like she might have an answer, like she might say, Oh, sure, now I understand. She was Astrid the genius after all, but all she said was, It doesn't make any sense. Sam lifted the receiver on the wall phone, a landline. Nope, no dial tone. Is there a radio in here? There wasn't. The door slammed open, and in rushed 2 kids, 5th graders, their faces wild and excited. We own the school, one yelled, and the other gave an answering hoot. We're gonna bust open the candy machine, the first one announced. Maybe that's not such a good idea, Sam said. You can't tell us what to do, belligerent, but not sure of himself. Not sure he was right. You're right, little dude. But look, how we all try to keep it together until we figure out what's going on, Sam said. You keep it together, the kid yelled, and the other one hooted again, and off they went. I guess it would be wrong to ask them to bring me a Twix, Sam muttered. 15, Astrid said. No, man, they were like 10, Quinn said. No, not them. The kids in my class. Jink and Michael, They were both math whizzes, better than me, but they had learning disabilities. Dyslexia that kept them back. They were both a little older. I was the only 14-year-old. I think that maybe Josh was 15 in our class, Sam said. So? So, he was 15, Quinn, and he just disappeared. Blink and he was gone. No way, Quinn said, shaking his head. Every adult and older kid in our school just disappeared? That makes no sense. It's not just the school, Astrid said. What? Quinn snapped at her. The phones and the TV, Astrid said. No, Quinn said. He was shaking his head, half smiling, like he hoped he'd been told a bad joke. My mom, Sam said. Man, stop this, Quinn said. All right, it's not funny. For the first time, Sam felt the edge of panic, like a tingling at the base of his spine. His heart was thumping in his chest, laboring as if he'd been running. Sam swallowed hard. He sucked at the air, unable to take more than shallow breaths. He looked at his friend's face. He'd never seen Quinn scared. Quinn's eyes were behind shades, but his mouth quivered, and a pink stain was creeping up his neck. Astrid was still calm, frowning and concentrating, trying to make sense out of it all. We have to check this out, Sam said. Quinn let loose a sort of sobering breath. He was already moving, turning away. Sam grabbed his shoulder. Get off me, brah, Quinn snapped. I gotta go home. I have to see. We all have to see, Sam said. But let's go together. Quinn started to pull away, but Sam tightened his grip. Quinn, together. Come on, man. It's like a wipeout, You get launched. What do? You try not to get worked up, Quinn muttered. That's right. You keep your head straight through the spin cycle, right? And then you swim toward daylight. Surfing metaphor? Astrid asked. Quinn stopped resisting. He let go of a shuddering breath. Okay, yeah, you're right, together. But my house first. This is so messed up. Astrid? Sam asked, not sure of her, not sure at all if she wanted to go with him and Quinn. It felt presumptuous to ask her, and wrong not to ask. She looked at Sam, looked like she was hoping to find something in his face, and Sam suddenly realized that Astrid the genius didn't know what to do or where to go any better than he did, and that seemed impossible. From the hallway they heard a rising cacophony of voices, loud, scared, some babbling, as if it would be okay as long as they didn't stop talking. Some voices were wild. It wasn't a good sound. It was frightening all by itself, that sound. Come with us, Astrid, okay? Sam said. We'll be safer together. Astrid flinched at the word safer, but she nodded. The school was dangerous now. Scared people did scary things sometimes, even kids. Sam knew that from personal experience. Fear could be dangerous. Fear could get people hurt. And there was nothing but fear running crazy through the school. Life in Perdido Beach had changed. Something big and terrible had happened. Sam hoped he wasn't the cause. What? Now, why would Sam think he could have caused all these adults to disappear? And if you read the rest of the story, you find out not only do the people over a certain age disappear, but these kids are in a special location. They're trapped in that, and they can't communicate outside of it. So we have a whole bunch of scared kids of young ages. There's some kids who are, shall we say, on the bullyish side. And then there are kids who they're caring and good people. However, sometimes they don't always come out on top. And then if you read further, you learn that somehow some of the kids that are involved in this trapped location without adults, they start developing mutations, powers. And it's not always the good people who are getting them, and it's not always mutations that they like. So I do hope you check this book out. It's exciting as all get out. And, how can you go wrong with such a great author team with Michael Grant and the influence, I'm sure, of his wife, Catherine Applegate. I'll see you next Friday, and I hope you have a good week.